On March 14th, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II would face his last day in power as one of the worst leaders of the modern era before abdicating the next day on March 15th. When he left his throne, it laid a barren wasteland. The next in line after he pulled his son out of the chair, his brother, refused to step up. It effectively ended the Romanov dynasty, and this little revolution that caused the fall of the Russian autocracy would go on to represent the buildup of anger within the people, their right to basic nutrition and food effectively neglected. Tsar and imperial government were responsible for providing this to everyone. However, due to Tsar Nicholas's incompetency, things would not go as expected. In 1905, the first of many Russian revolutions, the Bloody Sunday of 1905, occurred. It was the first revolution in almost a century where the people revolted and succeeded, which led to the creation of the Duma, Russia's lower house of their parliament, in 1906. However, the nation was still controlled by Tsar Nicholas. It acted as a prelude to the February Revolution in a sense. Russia was far behind in modernization efforts, Tsar Nicholas refusing to enact changes that would and could threaten his power, even repealing the October Manifesto, a promise on political reform after the Bloody Sunday. His avid participation during the First World War was a good example of his conservatism, constantly ignoring the complaints of the people. This further launched Russia into political unrest and economic instability. The Duma, unable to do anything to fight these injustices, as Tsar Nicholas always threatened to dissolve them if attempted. Tsar's 1.4 million man army suffered, where it said at least 800,000 men were unable to have a gun on hand. The amount of bullets they got to shoot in a day were limited to around 13,000 rounds, and every shot had to count. Factories couldn't keep up with the huge demand, seen through their lack of modern weapons or bullets. The inner workings of the country at the time of participation were rough too. His wife, Alexandra Fedorovna, left to take care of Russia while he was away at war. She wasn't very liked by the public. They were highly suspicious of her German ancestry, coupled with the fact that there were often food shortages as farmers had to leave fighting in the war, and railways having trouble handling the load of getting food to the military and people throughout the Russian nation. It was hard on everyone, as strikes continued to occur throughout different cities, Petrograd the main focus of this retaliation. March 8th, 1917. Bread supplies limited as prices skyrocketed, tensions brewing as people have to form bread lines in order to feed their family. On this specific day, it happens to be International Women's Day. Thousands of women flooded onto the streets from their jobs, fuming as they chanted,
Bread, 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 bread.
They marched through Petrograd, their destination nearby factory neighborhoods, hoping to initiate a large protest. Their hopes were heard, and people from all walks of life joined in. The march initially holding 7,000 women, but towards the end of that exact same day, it's estimated around a staggering 90,000 protesters flooded the streets. Everyone is obviously mad as students, men, and women vandalize, smashing through food shops out of frustration. 2 days pass, and it's now March 10th. Almost all the workers in Petrograd have decided to strike and rebel, destroying buildings and turning violent. Fired up for the fourth day, reinforcements eventually arrived. Police and soldiers get called in to suppress the revolt as it turns dangerous, but something unexpected happens. Shots ring out, but as time carries on, the protesters don't stop. The military wavers as they watch the protesters, looking out at the crowd and seeing reminders of their family. For mothers and fathers, friends and siblings, wives and girlfriends, soldiers didn't want to hurt anyone, their decision further validated by the urging of the woman.
Join us, join us, join us.
The soldiers shared solidarity with the protesters, deciding they couldn't shoot. A handful started a mutiny that spread to all the militia forced to fight against the people, some soldiers even going as far as attacking the police, not just peacefully letting the demonstrators pass by. Losing military cooperation put the loyal police force at a disadvantage, vulnerable to protester violence. The next day on March 12th, the technical end of the revolution drew near. Some 200,000 soldiers mutinied against the Tsar and police, most secretly rebelling, pretending to shoot at protesters and letting them pass, while active mutineers would often turn against the police, bearing arms. The revolters and soldiers unified, an air of solidarity among them. Over the course of 3 days, a successful infiltration of the Petrograd capital occurred. The Petrograd Soviet of Workers and Soldiers Deputies was formed, claiming to represent the peasant and lower class interests. Committees were established among the striking workers and mutinied soldiers, each electing their own representative to join this newfound workers' committee. Following this infiltration, the imperial government had to step down, forcing the Duma to implement a provisional government to keep the power balance. This was also known as the period of dual power, where the Petrograd Soviet and provisional government shared authoritative power for a few months. That exact same day, Order Number 1 of the Petrograd Soviet was enacted, which essentially monopolized the military in their favor. Looking at these specific rules, to be immediately and fully executed by all men in the guards, army, artillery, and navy, and to be made known to the Petrograd workers. 3. In all their political actions, units are subordinated to the Soviet of Workers and Soldiers deputies and their own committees. 4. All issues ordered by the Military Commission of the State Duma shall be carried out, except those which run counter to the orders and decrees issued by the Soviet of Workers and Soldiers deputies. It shows the Petrograd Soviet asserting dominance over the Duma. March 15th is when things got serious. Tsar Nicholas abdicated his throne and pulled his son from running, instead favoring his brother as candidate. However, his brother didn't step up, ending Russian autocracy and the Romanov dynasty. Although, this didn't stop the provisional government from continuing participation within the war. This over time caused unrest within the people, especially at such a sudden change. Nothing would change for months, up until November of that same year, most famously known as the October Revolution. After the Tsar was removed, the government was weak, the provisional government not meeting everyone's expectations. The Bolsheviks, a revolutionary party led by Vladimir Lenin, were secretly brewing up a plan to reorganize politics from top to bottom. At the time of the February Revolution, however, Lenin was exiled in Germany, but he escaped and snuck back into Russia. Landing on Petrograd soil after the revolution, he quickly introduced the April Thesis. It essentially talked about his goals for reform into a communist government. His iconic slogan, Peace, Bread, and Land, attracted the people as well as the Petrograd Soviet after months of stagnation. Opting to join forces, they stormed Petrograd officially on November 7th, taking over in what's known as the October Revolution, calling themselves the Soviets. It was a relatively bloodless takeover with Lenin at its head, the first communist state now emerging. After they came into power, they implemented the Georgian calendar over the previously used Julian calendar, which brings to my use of March instead of February. However, life wouldn't be smooth sailing from there, as Russia would be stuck in a civil war between the anti Soviets and new communist government for 5 years. The opposing side was referred to as the Whites, and communists as the Reds. Many countries were forced into conflict with Russia at this sudden change of events, especially after Lenin pulled the nation out of World War I. The Whites quickly gained popularity among the other nations as they allied to keep Russia in, wanting to distract Germany from the Western Front. That plan fell through as the Soviets soon won against the Whites in 1922. This influenced Russia to move outward and expand. Joseph Stalin forcing communism onto North Korea and Vietnam most notably after Lenin died, meaning communism was gaining a foothold in the world, China and Cuba willingly adopting this form of government. With all these communist nations, they joined arms. The USSR, or Soviet Union, was formed in 1922. After World War II, America wanted to stop communism from spreading, fearful of how the balance of power could be affected. Many communist countries of the Soviet Union were forced to fight, throwing the world into a bloody turmoil for years before its collapse in December of 1991. In a nutshell, the February Revolution paved the way for devastating change not only throughout Russia, but the world. It all started from the people and their right to proper nutrition, especially something as basic as bread, and the responsibilities of the Tsar to provide that. Looking back at everything I talked about, it's important to remember that change can be made. As long as the majority want it, it'll happen one way or another. Through organized unions or spontaneous revolt, the change you feel is needed can be achieved, and the government should try and support that change before things turn violent and get out of control. It's an important part of history that is sometimes overlooked by the October Revolution, but you need to remember the main reason why the Bolsheviks were able to overthrow the government was due to the February Revolution weakening it, allowing optimal conditions to take over, and introducing the first communist government at the time